bunch small boxes of them.
The Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm Steven Sakach here again with my co-host, Mike Liwski, and our special guest today, who we'll introduce in a moment. So, employees who experience genuine empathy from their leaders report higher engagement, stronger innovation, and are significantly less likely to leave their jobs. And one global study found that more than 80% of workers who say empathy from leadership will improve their job satisfaction, creativity, and loyalty to the organization. Today, we are exploring what it looks like to put empathy at the center of business, not just in our personal conversations, but in how we design goals, handle conflict, and help people move from where they are to where they most want to be. Mike, introduce our guest today.
Oh, Stephen, delighted to do so. So our guest today is Karen Price Owen. She's an executive and life coach on really a mission to empower others to navigate the transformative journey from where they are today to where they want to be and where they can be. And Karen's a certified executive and life coach who specializes really in helping people unveil their true potential across all phases of life so that they can really craft a future they genuinely desire. Now, through her coaching practice, as well as speaking and the workshops that she does, Karen's guided leaders, professionals, and even teams through meaningful transformations in both their personal and professional lives. And she believes deeply in the extraordinary power that resides within each individual and really uses empathy, clarity, and practical strategy to help people to design the lives and the careers that they love living. So she's just the perfect guest for us to discuss this topic with today. So Karen, welcome to the Bliss Business Podcast.
Thank you so much. Man, I really appreciate that introduction. One of the things that I'm going to talk about in terms of empathy is authenticity. You'll hear me say that a lot today. And so in honor of my own authenticity, I want you to know that I have copious notes because I rely on them. I rely on them quite a bit. So you're going to see me looking down. Don't get upset with me. I'm just being me. Okay?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. That's beautiful. But maybe to jump into the topic, Karen, maybe tell us, is there some sort of personal connection to the topic of empathy in business, or did it lead to your own journey in coaching and leadership development? I mean, why was it so important for our discussion?
Thank you so much for asking me that. And absolutely, I mean, I think that the role of empathy led me to the job I'm doing today. And I don't really call it a job. It's more of a calling. So let me tell you a story. Let me tell you my story. I spent over 25 years and probably more, but I don't want to sound like I'm that old, in corporate leadership. And I believed that I had, in order to be effective, I had to choose that effectiveness, professional thing over empathy, personal thing, right? So I had to armor up. I thought empathy was something you did after hours with your family and your friends, right? That business required a different version of me, one that was sharper, harder, bulletproof, right? And I don't think that's unique to me, actually. But what I discovered, and sometimes painfully, to be honest, is that this split was costing me and everyone around me. I don't know if you ever heard have you ever heard the name Brené Brown?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to rely a lot on Brené Brown, but also a lot on Martha Beck. So Brené Brown talks about armored leadership, and I was absolutely wearing that armor, every single piece you can imagine. When I went into the office, I was leading from fear dressed up as strength, right? My teams could feel it, but they couldn't name it probably. So the shift began when that kind of leadership no longer worked for me. I discovered then Martha Beck, who I am certified with. Have you ever heard of her?
Mm-mm.
No? Okay.
I can't say that I have.
You have?
I can't say that I have yet, but I'm going to write it down and make sure we look
Let's
her
write
up.
it down. And the only, it's phenomenal. I won't go any further than that, except to say that she's Oprah's coach. That might be helpful. Okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, Martha and Brene helped me understand what I was doing wrong and where I needed to go. And what's really interesting and what I loved about what I learned from both of them is I needed to go in here. What I was looking for, I thought, was out there. But what I needed to do was go inside and figure out what was really going on with me. I needed to understand what my armor was, what my shame triggers were. I needed to figure out what Martha Beck calls the gap between the essential self and the social self. And quickly, the difference between those are the essential self is who we are, who we really are. The social self is what culture, society, our businesses expect us to be, right? And you can only play that social self for so long, and your essential self is going to kind of rebel a little bit. So once I started leading from a more integrated place, from my whole self rather than that professional self, everything changed. Not because I became soft or lowered my standards, but because I became real. I had the hard conversations with more kindness, right? I held people accountable, but still seeing their full humanity. And I found that I could say, I don't know, without feeling like a fraud. Often I was too afraid to say, I don't know, and came up with some other BS answer, right? That didn't feel authentic by any stretch. So that transformation was so profound for me that I knew I had to help others. I knew that I needed to live more into my authenticity. And so I became a Martha Beck certified coach. I actually helped develop a coaching program at the corporation I was working with. It was a healthcare organization out of Philadelphia. And then decided I'm going out and practicing on my own because, and guys, you'll love this. My job was VP of Marketing and Communications. I hired agencies. And the one that Zero Company is the one I wish I had worked with, to be honest with you. So anyway, I went from being armored up to authentically myself. And I want nothing more than anything for others to live their authentic.
Yes. And it's such a difference, like you mentioned, your team feels that. And I think a lot of people, they're scared of like maybe that vulnerability of kind of making that move. But really that's actually kind of, I always say, one of those like Yoda level skills in leadership is that it brings you closer together with your teams when you're vulnerable in that way. So when you think about empathy and how it actually looks like in leaders and organizations you work with, what do you want to see from leaders in part of your coaching as they go through kind of that similar journey that you went through?
Well, I'm trying to see, where did we ask that question? Well, what I want to start with first is there is an amazing example of an organization that is incredibly successful that leads with empathy, and that one is Microsoft. You've heard of it. Mm-hmm. The current CEO is Satya Nadella, and when he became CEO in 2014, the organization was in the crapper, not doing well at all.
Right.
And what he learned, because he has a special needs son, was the value of empathy. So what he did is he created a program. I don't want to say a program, a framework around something called model, coach, and care. And that embedded empathy, collaboration, and a growth mindset within that organization. What was lovely, and this is another part of empathy, that he went from a know-it-all organization to a learn-it-all organization. So we don't have to be know-it-alls. We want to learn, right? And that created an opportunity for failure to be accepted, right? He also made sure that people were emotionally intelligent, and I can talk more about that in a minute too, and use vulnerability, both of those, as core leadership competencies. So he taught his leadership team, or he made sure his leadership team understood what psychologically emotional safety is. What emotional intelligence is and what vulnerability is. Mm-hmm. And then he created psychological safety. And that's where I messed that up, where failure became, an opportunity to learn. And I work with all of my clients. One of the things that I have, I notice all the time is we as human beings think failure is bad, right?
Mm.
When we can accept failure as, oh, I get to try again, changes the whole dynamics, right? And you want to jump back in. You don't want to walk away from the game. So that's one way of leadership and vulnerability or empathy.
Empathy, yeah, for sure. So diving maybe a little bit, deeper, Karen, into the work you do. So obviously, you work with oftentimes individuals who might be transitioning, or all of us, right, face significant decisions that we might need to make in our lives. Sometimes leaders get burned out, quite honestly, or even they get stuck, and sometimes they're just feeling like they're living someone else's version of success, as we've come to understand. So I'm really curious, like from your vantage point, what are some of the most common ways that a lack of empathy, I guess, shows up in organizations, and then how does that end up affecting people really on the inside?
You just hit the nail on the head. A lack of empathy does actually cause burnout, and it causes uses of emotion that are inappropriate. It causes people to live out of alignment with who they are. And then burnout, as you know, is something that is very hard to recover from unless you take some time to take care of yourself, and that means taking care of your inner self. So I if you will, ask that question again, because I have another answer.
Yeah, no, for sure. Because I think it's really important when it comes to leaders to understand, what are some of the most common ways that lack of empathy ends up showing up in an organization, and then maybe describe the effects that it has on people.
Thank you. All right. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you all have seen a video that it's just like a 3-minute video that was put together based on a speech that Brene Brown gave in London in 2022. And in the speech, she describes what empathy is. So I'm going to give you a little bit of that right now. Again, it's hard for us to be empathetic when we're armored up, right? So the first step is to open up and to be more of our essential selves. Okay. It's also understanding what it's like to be in our own bodies. And oftentimes burnout kind of disconnects us from our own bodies. So those are other things that you need to do. But based on what I want to do is just describe what it takes to be empathetic from Brene Brown's point of view. And actually, this is from the point of view of a scholar by the name of Teresa Wiseman. Empathy fuels connection. Oftentimes we get burned out when we're not connected, right? So what are the 4 qualities of empathy? So I just want to share these with you real quick. It's perspective taking. When you can sit with someone, whenever they're in pain, usually that's when empathy is called for. When they're in some type of suffering position, you can take their perspective. You can understand this is their truth, right? And then what you do is you stay with them without judgment. So somebody can be in pain, and it might to you seem like trivial, but you don't judge. It's their pain, right? That's not easy, but that's what it's number 2. Number 3, recognizing that emotion in others and communicating it. Hey, I see you're not feeling well. It looks like you're really upset. What's going on? I've named it. You're upset. I've asked a question, and the person in front of me can say, I'm not really upset. I'm angry. Oh, okay. Tell me more, right? So when you say, tell me more, you're ready to feel with people. And that's really what empathy is not sympathy, not, oh, I'm sorry. It's not even, I'm sorry. If you think about it, empathy is not sorry. It looks like I'm moving slow, guys. There we go. Empathy is not, I'm sorry. Empathy is, I feel you. I hear you. I want to learn more. No judging. One of the things in this video you'll hear, it's beautifully illustrated, is what isn't empathy. And empathy isn't saying, well, because that means you're dismissing that other person's pain. So you don't go there. You don't try to fix. You just listen. So the question was, what do we do with empathy as leaders, and how do we use it to get out of burnout? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, I would say at that point, yeah, because it shows up a lot of different ways in organizations.
I think the way we get out of not being empathetic, or getting out of burnout, if you will, again, is through that connection. And you guys, it sounds like that's what you do at Zero Company, is that you really focus on listening to others, yourselves, as well as your clients, right? And I think when we are able to get out of ourselves and our own little worlds and get into others, the energy from that can be massive and can help us feel better and feel a little bit more human. And the more we can take our armor off and feel a lot more like ourselves, we will eliminate that feeling of burnout.
Yeah,
I love that you mentioned that, that pause almost of before you fix something is you really need to be present for them. Because I think a lot of times, and I think men get this a lot of times too, is they just want to fix something where they just need, and it's almost like a sort of a emotional deflection. They don't really want to sit with the emotions that are happening right there, I think, right? And so they kind of want to move on to fix it without pausing for a moment just to be present with what is going on. And that's that true empathetic motion. So it's kind of this empathetic, so it's sort of this bypass that happens almost unconsciously, that a lot of people just go into that mode. But so, yeah, and I love that you mentioned that. I want to talk a little bit about how we can systemize some things, because one of the things we really like to discuss is, obviously we talk about leaders and how they affect things, and it trickles down. From a systems perspective, what do you think needs to be in place so that empathy is just not up to individual personalities, like you, or that one special person that really has that empathetic thing, but it's built into how goals are set, or feedback is given, or how decisions are made? So what do you think from a systems perspective needs to be in place for empathy to show up?
Well, okay, so thank you for that question. I think to operationalize empathy, much like Microsoft did, you need systems that honor actionable frameworks, like Microsoft did, that really focus on truth seeking, right? So here's what that might look like. That might look like regular integrity check-ins. And what that means is, in your one-on-ones with the people that work with you, for you, whatever, that you have weekly or bi-weekly. These are not annual reviews. This is not once a year and you check it off and it's done, right? It's not that at all. It's really connecting with the people that work with you, and structured around 3 key questions. What's true? Again, I talked about truth seeking. What's true? What hurts? And what would feel better? We don't often talk about feeling in the workplace, but we really don't perform well unless we're feeling well. And feeling is, subjective to everybody. How are you feeling? Well, one of the things that's real important to understand is through Brene Brown's work. She has a publication she put out a few years ago called Atlas of the Heart. In that book, she recognizes 87 emotions. 87 emotions. Do you know how many we talk about in business? 3. Stressed, busy, tired.
That's awful.
We don't. Yeah, right. So we don't have an emotional vocabulary. And again, that's what Microsoft did. They created emotional intelligence for people to understand that there are so many more emotions that need to be explored and recognized and almost honored, right? So these regular check-ins with what is real. Here's the other thing that's really important to know about this truth-seeking thing. Suffering comes from living outside of reality.
Yeah, there's a gap, right? Yeah.
Yes. Pain comes when you wish it weren't, or you wish it was different, or you wish, right? A lot of pain comes from that.
Yeah,
So
it
you want
makes
to
a
get
lot of
to the
sense,
truth.
right?
Say that again.
I say it makes a lot of sense, right? Because there's a gap there, and that gap creates the stress or the pressure. I'm curious, Karen, too. You mentioned the Microsoft example. Are there other ways to actually scale empathy within an organization? Or, where do leaders, I guess, or companies succeed in that?
Well, there's another piece to the other question that I had, but leads to that answer as well.
Okay.
And that is, aside from those regular integrity check-ins, if you will, are value-based decision making. And that concept is, for you as a leader, you as a human being, identify what your core values are, right? And live within those. Identify what the corporation's core values are. Zero Company has amazing core values that are easy to recognize and to list as your own, right? But when you have your own core values and you work within those core values, you have what's called integrity. So oftentimes we talk about, values-based decision making. I talked a minute ago about Brené's work around the body. What we understand is when we make decisions that are within our integrity, it feels good internally. When we make decisions outside of it doesn't feel good, it's outside of our integrity, we're not going to perform very well, right? So what we often ask ourselves, especially around this values-based decision making, is this aligned in my body? Two of my core values are respect and trust, right? Is this me being respectful, or am I being respected? Number one. Number two, do I trust the information I get? Do I trust decision making, right? How does it feel in my body? Is it aligned? So what you can do is you can train leaders to notice when something feels off, even when it looks good on paper. Have you guys, I'm a coach, so I ask questions too. So have you ever had an experience with someone that you worked with where, or even in your own experience, trying to make a decision and everything looks right on paper, but it just doesn't feel right? Purchasing of that yacht that you wanted, Michael, right? The numbers figured it out, but just didn't feel right.
Oh yeah. I mean,
I think that with our culture too, at our work, I think that, happens a lot sometimes where something just doesn't feel right according to the way our culture is, right? And it almost sticks out really apparent. And the stronger our culture is, I think the more those, whatever it is, they just stick out. And you end up either self-correcting or, the culture helps correct it in a way, according to the culture. But I do think it really is important that you have that aspect of how does it feel in it, because is it authentic to your culture that you've built up? Is it not? And you can get in a lot of trouble when you're not asking that question. I think you take something like, let's go to like Purdue Pharma, right? You've got a leader without empathy. And, then you have teams without empathy, breaking the culture. You got a culture without empathy, and then that's breaking this company. And then you got a company without empathy, and it's just wrecking the health marketplace, right? And that marketplace, it breaks out to breaking into society. I mean, it just trickles down all from those areas. Yeah. And along the way, though, I think a lot of people were like, this doesn't quite feel right, but I don't know. This is our culture. This is what we're doing right here. And so they don't end up stopping for a moment, like you're saying, like just something doesn't feel right here, and because they just think it's their job,
right? And or they're armored up.
Yeah, or they're armored up, and this is what we do, right? We just put this on.
That's right. That's what the boss said. Let's go. Let's go.
That's what the boss said. They're going, and you can see how, just like with that Purdue Pharma, how it just can trickle down or ripple just across society. I think when you just don't stop for a moment, just to someone, hey, how does this feel? This is not feeling right.
Yeah. That's a beautiful example. Pharma. That's a thank you for bringing that up. On so many levels, that's a beautiful example. What'd you say, Michael?
Yeah, I was just saying you don't really want to go down that path specifically. Yeah.
No. And I would say in your business too, there are clients that you might potentially turn down because they are not They don't live your values, or you take them on and realize down the road, oops. But I bet somewhere earlier somebody's like, I don't know.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And it's like, we try to vet some of that before they come into the agency. But I also like occasionally our account managers to be a little bit challenged by someone that, we don't want to go crazy because they can take a lot of the energy, but sometimes they can really push your ability to be empathetic, or how do I work with this person who's coming at it from this way or that way. Don't want a lot of that because it is
exhausting.
Exhausting, right? Yeah. But I do think it does help us get better occasionally when we've got something in the mix that's, a little off from, something that's as easy, right? So that does happen. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. And I think as human beings, we want to be challenged, right? That's kind of why we're on the planet. Hey, listen, there's one other thing I want to share with you in terms of, a systems perspective or frameworks. Again, this is from Brene Brown, and it's called braving. And if you can imagine it being all caps, braving, because that's an acronym, to build trust within your organization. Okay. So the B stands for boundaries. So when everyone in your organization understands what their roles are and their decision-making capabilities are, those are their boundaries, right? Those are my boundaries. Those are your boundaries. Reliability, that we keep commitments no matter what, right? We're reliable. Accountability, I made a mistake. We're not punished for it. It's like, okay, how do we fix this? What do we do to go forward? What do we learn from this? That was clearly not the right direction. What do we do next? Vault, that's the V in braving. That means to protect confidentiality no matter what, right? That's critical. Trust is blown away when you lose that. Integrity, close that gap between values and behavior. Get closer in behavior to your values. And then non-judgment. Again, back to those mistakes. Learn to create a learning culture. Create a culture that accepts learning as something that is paramount to your business. We are learning and growing, learning and growing, learning and growing. Mistakes are okay. And then the last one, G, generosity. This one's tough. Always assume positive intent. So it's not always easy when you're in the middle of a busy day and somebody pops into your office and it's like, ugh, I don't want to deal with this. This person's going to be here to whine. Better to assume this person has something that they need to share with me, and I should value that and appreciate it, right? Yeah. So always assuming positive intent. Michael, what's that little snicker about?
Yeah.
Did I hit something there?
I just think about that when you're driving. I always try to assume positive intent. Like someone does something like, well, I don't know what they're going through. I don't know what's happening.
They're coming from a good place.
Yay!
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, especially growing up in the LA traffic area, you can. There's a lot of assuming of positive intent. I'll just say.
Yes, I mean, you know what that does to you physically? When you assume positive,
less cortisol.
Absolutely right. When you assume positive intent, as you will on the LA freeway, which I don't think you move very fast on that anyway, but when you're cut off and you're like, okay, somebody's got a pregnant woman in the car, not going to deal with, not going to worry about it, not call him a jerk or get upset. Your body is chill. No problem. No big deal. Mm-hmm. You're right. The cortisol doesn't go up here. So that's very helpful to you when you adopt that attitude.
So, and I just assume there's a lot of people going to the hospital in LA all the time. So that's what's going on, I think. Mike, I know we want to talk a little bit. Let's dive into purpose a little bit.
Sure. Or maybe, I guess maybe Steve, before we do that, because we do want to dive into purpose. I want to just ask this one last question of Karen. Okay. When it comes to practices that can help teams, when they're facing a high pressure situation, it's very easy for empathy to sort of just go out the door. Is there something that teams can do to maintain empathy in those situations without losing necessarily the focus on achieving a result?
Yeah, that's called, and back to Brene Brown, that's permission for the messy middle, right?
Mm-mm-mm.
That means moving through discomfort and suffering when you ask the questions, what is true here? You build in systems that acknowledge those transitions, especially when you're in the messy middle. When you're in the middle of an intense program or project or whatever, you're going to have certain team members burn out, or they're going to come in and a life-changing thing has happened to them, right? Whether they wanted it or not. It could be they're dealing with grief, right? You have to understand that that's messy and it's all normal. It's all normal. So what do? You create reset weeks or reset days or reset half hours or reset hours. You understand that these are human beings coming in with issues outside of their control or your control. And you talk about what we call North Star conversations. And that is, what's true for you right now? What do you need to be in integrity, to be your most authentic, right? What do you need? Now, I can tell you, during the COVID pandemic, I told you I was in marketing and communications for a healthcare organization. Everybody else was out learning how to paint or knit. And I was every day glued to the computer and burned out because every minute things were changing. Mask, no mask. Vaccines, no. I mean, it was crazy. And I remember my boss saying, Karen, what do you need right now? And I couldn't answer that question.
Mm-hmm.
So what I had hoped she would have in the moment was the understanding that she's frozen. Mm-hmm. She's burned out. She needs a rest, right? I've learned now how to do that. But oftentimes as leaders, we've got to realize, even when we ask people what they need and they don't know, that's a big red flag. You're disassociated. You're burned out. You need some time. Yeah. Go get associated with yourself. Did that answer your question, Michael?
Yeah, I think it's a good point, right? So essentially what we're telling the audience is when pressure goes up, empathy has to go up, right? It's not that pressure goes up, empathy goes down. It's they both have to be moving in the same direction. But yeah, so maybe jumping to a regular segment that we have on this show where we discuss purpose. It's also, you mentioned the marketing agency earlier. It's a core component of how we like to do marketing. Number one, even helping our clients understand that, like you said earlier, empathy creates the greatest connection. So in the marketing that we create for them, we want to lead with empathy. And then a lot of times it comes with a connection to purpose, because we've really found that empathy tends to be more sustainable when it's rooted in a deeper purpose, about why we're doing certain things or why something really matters. So maybe curious, Karen, and just your view around like what's either the deeper purpose behind the work that you do. Like, what is the importance of purpose, say with the clients that you work with, or the organizations that you work with?
Right. Good question. Well, I would say that my purpose sits in both integrity and what Brene Brown calls wholehearted living. And so again, that's helping people close that gap between the life they're performing and the life that's true for them. And what we want to do is my purpose is to, get them together like that. And everybody suffers when they're out of integrity. It's just the difference between who we are and how we're showing up. And we can only live wholeheartedly. And God only knows it's a tough lesson for me. It's when we have the courage to be vulnerable. It's the courage to live by our values, and to live by our values even when it's uncomfortable. Remember, I was telling you earlier, 2 of my core values are trust or honesty and respect. Well, respect works both ways. So sometimes it's uncomfortable for me to be respectful, right? When I feel like I've been dismissed for whatever reasons, it's really hard to be respectful. So I get uncomfortable and become respectful. And it's amazing how that has improved my connections with others. So like you said earlier, my work is helping people come home to themselves and to reconnect to their North Stars and helping them build the courage to show up and to be seen as to who they are, right? And again, like we talked about earlier, too many of us come to work split. We have our home selves or our outside selves and our work selves. And we really just need to bring ourselves together. So in my life, in my job, this coaching, it's a fierce compassion, right? I use the body's wisdom, asking truth-seeking questions, and I help people access what's really real for them. And then I use frameworks, like I said, values, beliefs, and passions to help them act on their true bravery in the world. And I know these words sound a little lofty, but I know you guys know there are moments when you've had to be brave or you've had to use courage and you've had to be uncomfortable, right? Had to, chose to, whatever the words are, right? But I don't know if you've had this experience, but whenever I do that, the outcomes are always so much better than had I not been brave. When I back down, shy away, not deal with the situation, head in the sand, seems to always get worse, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
So that's my purpose. And then what I do is I help people understand what theirs are. And everybody's different. Not everybody comes to your agency with the same purpose, right? They come to a shared purpose, but their part of it, their purpose part of it is slightly different, probably.
We hope they do, but sometimes they don't have that shared purpose, and that's really where things start to change, right? When it becomes a shared purpose. Yeah.
Well, when you recognize that, the kind thing is to help them find something that will fill their purpose, and it won't be inside Zero Company. That's kind. Clear is kind.
So I want to talk a little bit. This is something that we always ask all of our guests, is some form of this type question. But we often talk of love as kind of a leadership practice. Not just a feeling, but or something we leave at home, right? Like we talked about at the beginning of the show. It shows up. It shows up in work, and how we listen or how we set boundaries, like you mentioned, how we advocate for the people we lead. When you think about leaders and organizations you work with, what role does love play in creating a high-performing, healthy environment? How do you see that love shows up in practical ways?
I actually have a story to share about that. I kind of thought about it initially as one of empathy, but I think now with this question, it's a more fitting story about love. And that has to do with a CEO that I worked with many years ago, who was running an organization of 10,000 people. He was the most humble leader I had ever met. He was one of those guys that, while enormously successful and such a fabulous leader, he was the guy that would drive the 10-year-old car into the corporate park. He wouldn't allow a CEO parking spot, right? He just didn't want that. How he showed love and empathy, I think, is I was a lowly person in marketing at this big corporation. And I was in the corporate offices. His, offices were upstairs in the mahogany suites, right? But I would say on a regular basis, maybe at least once a month, he would come into my office. I was not unique. He would come to everybody's office and he would say, "How are you doing? Hey, I see these pictures of your kids here on your desk. Tell me about them. How are they doing? I just want you to know you're appreciated here. Thank you so much for the work you do. Hey, I've got to go check on some other people. Great to see you. Bye." How many CEOs have done that for you? What an example.
Yeah. It's a great example. It's a great story.
But that's to me, that's love is, again, connection.
Yep.
It's asking how it's showing interest and being genuine about it. There was nothing fake about this guy at all, right? He was very genuine.
Yeah.
He didn't ask me about business.
Yeah. No, and it's like one of the things we always say, and I've said it before on this podcast, and it's a different way of talking about love, is that it's make connection the goal of whatever we're doing, right? And I think that's, can be the North Star in tough conversations or difficult things that our team's going through, like Mike mentioned, when the stress hits and happens there. But no, yeah, I appreciate just that pause to connect with someone as a leader. I think there's a lot more of that's needed out there today.
So
Karen,
it
starts with us. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, this has been a fantastic show, and thank you so much for all of the insights you've shared. Now, for those listening in or our followers that'll listen to the show later on, they want to learn a little bit. They want to learn a little bit more about you and explore kind of the work that you've been doing. Where can they connect with you, or find out more about your work?
Thank you. Thank you for asking. First of all, I am the worst at promoting myself, so thank you for asking me about that. I have a website, KarenPriceOwenLifeCoach.com. Real easy to reach me there. And I have a Gmail, KarenPriceOwen@gmail.com. So those are two of the best ways to reach me. I'm not on the socials much, so I don't have to. I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn, but I focus my marketing and promotional work through this kind of work, through workshops and presentations. So thank you so much for asking me about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So they can follow up with you there. And then for me personally, this is not goodbye. It's just going to be until I see our audience next time. It's going to be my last show as one of the regular co-hosts. So it's been an absolute pleasure championing empathy and purpose and figuring out how we could bring more love into our businesses. And in fact, our new co-host is going to be Tullio Siragusa, who's the producer of this show, and Martha Huerta, who's the assistant producer. She's going to step into the role of producing the show herself. And so I can't wait to see, where they take the show and how they continue to champion empathy, purpose, and love along with Steve. So it's been an absolute pleasure. But again, I know they're going to take this show to some new heights, and I can't wait to see where it goes.
Yeah, Mike's not going anywhere. We're just expanding a podcast segment and all that. So yeah, don't worry about that. And I'm going to, Mike, I'm going to need a day off or two here occasionally on this. So we need, some,
agreed.
Like we were talking about earlier in the show.
Yeah, for sure.
But Karen, thank you for talking with us today. To our listeners, thank you. And as you think about your own leadership, ask where empathy already shows up naturally for you and where your systems, your habits, or anything else might be getting in the way from that. And thank you for joining us on the Bliss Business Podcast. We'll see you next time.